from the book of Matthew in the New Testament. The Pharisees went, and they plotted to entrap Jesus in what he said. So they sent their disciples along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere, and you teach the way of God in accordance with truth, and you show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. And he said to them, "Whose head is this? Whose title?" They answered, "The emperor's." And Jesus said to them, "Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." And when they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him, and they went away. This is the gospel of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Please be seated. I will tell you the story of last Sunday because it warms my heart in great moments of ministry to share the ministry with such a phenomenal partner in Pastor Angela. But before I left on vacation, I gave instructions to Pastor Angela and Amy Gilgenbach, our Director of Administration, and I said, it's been a while since I've been on vacation. I'm going to turn off my phone for 7 days straight. No texting, no voicemail, no email, no phone calls, and here is my wife's cell phone number. And there are only two reasons that you call my wife's cell phone number. Because the church is burning down, or something has happened to one of the staff. Everything else, Pastor Angela can take care of. And Sunday morning, the phone rang at 4:30 a.m. in California. And Eileen had her phone on the nightstand, and she picked it up, and she said, "It's Ascension." I said, "Honey, we're going to build a new church." And it went to voicemail, and Eileen picked up the voicemail, and she said, "It's Pastor Angela." What does she say? She says she thinks she has pink eye. What should she do? Give me the phone. Don't touch anybody. Good luck. Yes, she says, I didn't know. It is nothing short of an incredible gift, though, to be so incredibly confident in your partner in ministry that you can disappear. Nancy Miller of Oroville, California, tells the story of eagerly accepting an invitation to attend a neighborhood watch meeting in a neighbor's home. Nancy was the victim of a recent burglary in which her TV set, her Christmas stockings hung on the fireplace, and a favorite dress had been stolen right out of her house. And as she sat calmly through the presentation by the two police officers, she realized that she felt very comfortable sitting in the living room of this home. The TV across from her in the corner looked almost exactly like the one she had had in her own living room 2 weeks prior. And as she was listening, her eyes drifted to the fireplace where the stockings bore a strong resemblance to the stockings that were hung on her fireplace just a few weeks earlier. But the clincher was that the hostess was wearing a dress that was so close to the dress that was stolen that it really couldn't simply be a coincidence. And she chased the officers down outside, told them what she saw. The next day they returned with a search warrant, arrested the host and the hostess, and recovered $9,000 worth of stolen property from Nancy's house. The woman felt so comfortable in her neighbor's home because her image was all around the house. Her choices, her decorating talents, her traditions, her image everywhere around her. Teacher, we know that you are sincere, that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth, that you show deference to no one, and you do not regard people with partiality. Someone is getting buttered up for something today. Anytime there is that much sugar at the beginning of the conversation, someone's got a knife waiting to go in the back of that person. Early in my ministry, I got sucked into those conversations. Someone stops by the church. Pastor, do you just have a minute? Sure. Have a seat. Pastor, how are you? Oh, I'm good. Thank you for asking. How is your dog? What's his name? Luther? Oh, Luther's good. He's kind of a pain, but he's great. We love him. How is your wife? She's great. And just after I was lulled into that sweet place where the walls of defense had come down, and this is going to be just a nice get-to-know-you kind of moment. Bing, bang, bang, boom. Pastor, why won't you do this? Why did you do that? Why don't we do this? A smile to your face and a little knife to the back. Most of us can identify with that experience at one time or another. Jesus is just a little quicker this morning. He is the Son of God, after all. And so the religious leaders continue, tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not? Well, there it is. Did someone just throw chum into the water? Because we're about to go fishing. Can we trap him today? Those moments that come more often than not in the world we live in. Do you remember the game Mousetrap? Anybody remember the game? Give me a hand, because I'm getting really old up here, apparently. Do they still sell Mousetrap? Oh, thank God. We got to buy it for the children, so when Grandma and Grandpa come, they can play it with them. I used to love that game as a child. It had, I think, 1,000 pieces, and you spent the first part of the game with your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, your parents, your friends, and you would build the mousetrap all over the board. Do you remember that? It was a team effort, build the mousetrap. And the last part of the mousetrap was that like 10-inch plastic notched stick. And you would put the plastic dome cage at the top, and then you would tell everybody not to touch the board, because when they touch the board, they go all the way down to the bottom. You got to lock it back up all the way up to the top, and you tell everybody again, don't touch the board. I love that. I love the setup, I love the build-up, I love the team play, until the last piece of the trap was together, and then everybody's on their own, and whoever can catch the rest, that's the way it is. Every man, woman, and child for themselves. But Jesus isn't interested in a game of mousetrap. It's not that he's not willing to play, but the religious leaders can't figure out how Jesus always wins. So the gospel reading goes on. Jesus, aware of their malice. Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Ooh, he's got his own little bucket of chum, doesn't he? No polite Christian response, no turn the other cheek. A little anger directed toward the ones who always want to spoil the party and pull the messenger away from the message. If we get Jesus caught up in a debate, he'll lose supporters, the message will fail. But Jesus is ready. Who's got a coin? Show me a coin. Whose image, whose title is on the coin? Interestingly enough, someone is carrying a Roman coin. They're inside the walls of the temple. You cannot use Roman coins inside the walls of the temple, because whose image is on the coin? Emperor, the emperor's image. You can't use coins with images. It's idolatry in the temple. So you have to exchange your Roman coins for temple coins with just a little bit of interest for that transaction. Interestingly enough, someone's got a Roman coin. Metal that was used for Roman coins was worthless until it was imprinted with the image and the title of the emperor. Once the emperor's face was on the coin, now it was worth something. All of the financial stability of the entire empire was based on the face of the emperor on a coin. I don't even need to ask you the question, What would our markets look like if Obama's face was on a coin today? Whether you love him or hate him, we'd all be in trouble. Just like if it was Bush's face on the coin. So we put presidents who are long dead, who we love, or are beloved, because we don't have to worry about public opinion, right? Somebody has a Roman coin, and there is the emperor's face. The image of the emperor was the currency by which all things transpired. Jesus knows the Pharisees have finished building the trap, and they're ready to drop it. But Jesus isn't about to fall under the cage. One of the great challenges to the church today, and it has been at least my whole ministry, is that we are always in danger of being trapped by those who want nothing more than to see the Christian church disappear from the face of the earth. You know how the argument starts. You're talking with someone, sugar up front, knife in the back, and they say something to the effect of, certainly God would have us believe. Anytime they say certainly, you got to start watching where you're going. Certainly God would have us believe that homosexuality is what? That abortion is what? That immigration is, that same-sex marriage is, that stewardship of the earth is. You get the idea, right? And when the people of God are at their very best, what we do is we move aside and come back to the place of death and resurrection of a Savior. And that everything else is outside of that moment. But when we're at our very worst, we get caught in the trap. And we start putting our fingers into the dike to hold everything together, forgetting all along that God in Jesus Christ was never about building a dam, but about letting the river flow. Since we've been on vacation, the question of Ebola has been a topic in lots of places. And so my wife grew up in a family where her mother was a nurse, her godmother was a nurse, her sister and cousin are both nurses as well, and her third sister works in the medical profession. And so as everything started to break, one day we were sitting in the car and my wife asked the question, "Are you afraid?" And I said, "Well, no, not in the least." And she said, "Well, with all the stuff, absolutely. The media, in its great and wonderful knowledge, builds the mousetrap around us, does it not? Here is where we start. You walk down this journey with us. We'll be sometimes very, very objective, and sometimes we'll put a little opinion with it, but it's all news to you. And so walk with us down the road, won't you? And now we have nurses who have not taken the proper precautions, and is it their fault, or is it the hospital's fault? Was it the airport's fault? Why wasn't the CDC involved in screening from the moment this all broke? However many, we can ask questions forever. And so if you want to walk the road of why aren't you afraid, or shouldn't we be afraid, then what's the next step? Well, let's close the borders to Wisconsin, because they're really tight, right? We can just shut down the roads and nobody will get in. I don't know that that'll work. So then I asked the question at the last service, does anybody know the last time we closed the borders to this country? Venture a guess? 9/11 is the running road right now. I don't know that that's actually true. I know no flights were in or out. One of our members was stuck in Canada. So it sounds like they did, but I don't know if that was ever official. I don't know if that was World War II. Like, now I have to go find this out. So if you're better at the research, let me know this week. But the question I asked back is, why would I be afraid now? Because just 2 nights ago on Channel 4, they said there hasn't been one Ebola case in Wisconsin. That's great. Do we really expect we're not going to have one at some point? I don't know. But if I was going to be afraid, I would be afraid in the moment when our Lutheran Christian brothers and sisters in Western Africa began to contract the virus. Why am I not afraid until there is the opportunity that the fear and the danger is going to finally come into my own little world? Why am I not afraid that when my brothers and sisters are dying, and now I have brothers and sisters, the very youngest children of God, as orphans in Liberia and other parts of Western Africa, why am I not more afraid for the ways in which the world is reaching out? And gosh darn it, has the ELCA done a darn thing since this all broke? And I can't even answer that question. Why am I not more afraid for the fact that we live as global citizens in a world where we can see the protests in Hong Kong as they happen, even as their relatives and people across the bay in China cannot see the protests that are happening? So I'm not afraid of Ebola because I can't live in the fear of Ebola. I can live in the reality of Ebola, and I can live in the fact that in this moment we are being smarter about the precautions we take, and I would guess more of our hospitals are preparing for the possibility they will be dealing with Ebola, because we don't live in a world anymore where it takes you 3 months to get across the nation by covered wagon. And why isn't that the normal standard for us as a people, a global people, that we do not tend to each other with more care? So the question about paying taxes is not nearly as important for me as it is about giving the things that belong to the emperor, and the things that belong to God, to God. Because in the world in which we live, it all belongs to God. Like it or not, everything. From the quesadilla maker you had to have on TV, the George Foreman grill that you put the meat up here and the grease runs down and it's the perfectly prepared hamburger until you open it up and you can hit the hamburger against the wood. I bought it. I wasted my money. It's been gone for a long time. That magic bullet that you put everything in, it's going to grind it up, but when you press it down, it turns it into kind of this sauce, and when you take it out, you don't know what you put in there in the first place. I've owned those things, people. And I have to give thanks to God for giving me the resources to purchase those things. For what? The obvious point, I hope, is that each and every one of us and everything we own, it all belongs to God. And when I stop for a moment and answer the question of what belongs to God, we have to go one step farther to honor the fact that every single one of us, every person on this earth carries the image of our Father in heaven. And in the world in which I live, that means that every child who sleeps on the street because they've been orphaned by Ebola, they are brothers and sisters, and they belong to God, and they are connected to me, not just as a global citizen, but because they are a part of my family. Regardless of the world we live in, how we conduct ourselves on a daily basis, we cannot go through this world without recognizing that it is the face of God we see when we look in the mirror and the face of God we see in each other. When our son was born, he came out and he looked like an old man. Shriveled, tiny, squished head, old man. And people who lived far away would call and say, "Who does he look like?" And I'm like, well, it's not me. If he wants to look like Eileen, I'm fine, but it's not me. When I was born, because the stories happened instantly after that, my parents, I came out 6 weeks early. I had that fine layer of baby hair, and they said, "We loved you, but you look like a little bit of a monkey." But when Eileen was born, she went full term, and she was a healthy baby. And you know, when I say healthy, I mean fat and chunky healthy. And she was so fat and chunky that in most of her pictures, she does look like an adopted Chinese child, not a Norwegian and a Swedish child. And so when we got to the baptism for our son, you could see a nose and a chin and a cheekbone begin to take shape. But at the baptism, it was the image not of his mother or father, but the image of his Father in heaven that stayed with me. The same is true for each of us. It is true for Wesley Robert Janner, who will be baptized this day, as it was for his brother Zachary and his sister Addison. He may look like his father. Secretly, Jessica hopes he looks more like her. But regardless, Wesley will carry the image of his Father in heaven forever. Give to the emperor what is the emperor's. Give to God what is God's. The emperor never had a chance, because Jesus looked around at the gathered people as he looked at the whole world from the perspective of the cross he was hanging on. He saw only the reflection of his Father in heaven in every face, and knew that everything on heaven and earth belonged to God. And when they heard this, the Pharisees, the religious leaders, were amazed, and they left Jesus and they went away. And when we heard this, we were amazed, and we stayed to worship the one who calls us by name. Amen.